Doing all right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You doing all right?
Yeah, man.
Cool. We should be good. I think it's recording. It says it's
Yeah,
recording. So
said it was.
it is. All right. So today we are going to focus on interviewing, which you and I both love. And we're not being sarcastic about it. If we could get paid to go on job interviews and blow people's minds, we would love to do it. um, I do want to make sure that as we go through this, we talk about like what are some tips people could do. But one of the things I think is the most important thing is changing the mindset of people going into an interview. So how do you see that? What do if you're coaching somebody about how to interview, what are some of the first things you tell them to do?
I mean, I think just try to make sure that you realize that it's a two-way interview, not a one-way interview. You know, you are interviewing the company and the leaders just as much, if not more, than they're interviewing you. You know, so I think the power dynamic is not as one-sided as we often treat it or often think that it is.
And I agree with you. I mean, we've had this conversation, but it's interesting how often people will go into these interviews thinking like, oh my God, I hope I don't blow it. I hope I don't blow it, which actually psychologically puts them in this sort of position of weakness, right? They're sort of coming in, putting the potential company or their potential boss up on a pedestal, very similar to how salespeople do that to their prospects, right? It's the same thing.
Well, I think one of the reasons people run into that issue is maybe they lock in on like one company or one opportunity. You know, similar to a sales pipeline, they don't have enough interviews lined up, and so they get overly fixated on like, well, I got to nail this one. I need to make sure that they love me, so I get the offer, and it's the wrong way to approach it.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dive into that in a second, but I also sort of want to expound on that is that the premise of this is to understand that the mindset needs to shift, right? And don't put people up on a pedestal. And I think part of the problem is that nobody's ever taught them how to do this, right? Nobody ever taught. I remember when you and I were going through this, at different times in our careers, nobody ever told us how to do these interviews, right? At least as I recall it, you and I would get on the phone and we'd start talking about it. We go, oh my God, you're right. This is so much more fun now, right? And
how would you coach people now, right? Like if I was going to go through the interview process now, like what are a couple things that you would coach me to do?
Well, I'm going to sort of go back to the beginning. So the very beginning is looking at your resume and your LinkedIn profile.
Well, let's start there. Does a resume even matter anymore?
Only because people are stupid enough to still ask for it. And granted, you and I are in this different position where, we're not out interviewing for people. Although, I'll be the first to say I've taken the occasional interview every now just as a lead gen tool for myself and my training services, right? Like, but that's how I see it. It's like, well, if they want to talk to me, I might as well talk to them. They clearly have a problem. Maybe they will be so amazing, so cool that I'll have to consider actually going to work for them. But on the other hand, why wouldn't I take that as a perfect lead gen tool for what I do, right? Same for you. I know you've gotten jobs doing this, doing it this way, sort of balancing that consulting stuff. But to your question of, to me, they are one and the same. I know people will say differently. I know we're going to do a session on LinkedIn and some values of how to really build your LinkedIn profile. But it's funny to me because people will say, hey, can you send me your resume? And I'll just politely say, no, it's 2019. I don't do resumes. My LinkedIn is my resume. And part of the reason I say that, one, is because that's just the truth. But two, if I were really trying to promote myself the right way, we feel weird sending a 2-page resume. I don't care, and I don't think people care if they have to scroll 16 times to read something.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I definitely agree with that. Somebody sent me a resume the other day, and it was like 3.5 pages.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you gotta trim this. But if they send me their LinkedIn profile, I don't think anything of it.
You wouldn't even think about it. Totally.
No,
That's the first thing. The other thing I do, and I'm very meticulous about this. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, or what you think, but I don't care if it's sales or engineering or marketing or whatever. People who are looking at LinkedIn profiles or resumes, they want to respond to numbers first. So if I'm a salesperson, right, and I've hit quarter, I don't say Q4 2019 this percent. I literally start 110% dash Q4 2019. The next line, Q3, or I'm sorry, 98% Q3 2019. And then this is the other piece. People say, what happens if I had a shitty quarter? I'm like, that's fine as long as you've got other good quarters around it, right? Because I want you to be able to say, oh, Q1 72% Q1 2019. I want Scott to go, wait a minute, you hit it here. What happened here? That's the story, because that's what they're looking for. They want to tell that story. And to pretend like you hit every number every time is just foolish, unless you've done it. If you've done it, great. But if you haven't, be honest about it, and people respect that sincerity. But I'm really huge on that percentage, that growth has to come first. 15 reps hired and up and ramped in 6 months. 122% conversion from inbound leads to whatever. Put that percentage first, because I know that captures people's attention. What do you think about that? Have you ever seen it that way or thought about it?
I've never been in the position to have to put it up there on my own resume. I get those kind of resumes all the time. I hire maybe a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. I don't tend to be overly impressed by people who put numbers and percentages and attainments all over the place. When I'm trying to hire somebody, I'm much more concerned about who the heck is this person sitting across from me? What are they all about? Who are they? What are their goals are? All this kind of stuff. If I'm just staring at the resume, I don't really get a ton out of the resume.
But here's my point. I'm going to call bullshit on you a little bit, because before they show up, they still got to have this number. And I know you well enough that I know that you'd be like, all right, let's see if this motherfucker can really hit these numbers. Let's see if he or she can justify how they hit those numbers. So I want those numbers may not make you hire them, but don't they make you ask the stories you want to hear?
Not really. I mean, I'd be more interested in the story of like, okay, you were at, the Harris Consulting Group for the last 3.5 years. Okay, well, in order to be there for 3.5 years, like, you must have done pretty well. I see here that you've hit, these particular numbers. Like, what was the hard part? What was the good part about that job? What about the times you missed? And, you said before, like, just kind of own the fact if you haven't missed. That's that power dynamic thing I'm talking about. Again, people kind of dread maybe to having to talk about the time they missed or something. It's like, no, dude, just own it. Just own it. Just be like, here's what happened. I didn't prospect, enough. I learned that lesson, and you can see I fixed that in the next particular quarter.
Yep.
Right. Or, I had some health challenges, or, I lost a parent and this fucked me up.
Or it was my first quarter. It was random. Right.
I was just trying to figure out what the heck to do. Just like own it. And people don't own that story enough, again, because like, I think they don't go into it trying to get enough job opportunities. They go into it with like 1 or 2 interviews.
Yep.
And so they're just like too scared. So they come from this position of weakness. I literally wouldn't want to go work for somebody if they were like, nah, I'm not going to hire this guy because, his mom passed away and, he stopped performing. Like, right. I don't want to go work for that person anyways, right. Man. So if I want to work for somebody who gets me, who I tell my whole story to, and they're like, yeah, all right, I buy that. I like that. I want to work with that person.
Totally agree. And again, the easiest way to make if it was me and you, we'd probably walk into the interview, say hello, and in theory, at least I would be like, hey, I know your first question is going to be what happened in that quarter. So let's go ahead and talk about that first. Can we?
Yeah, just get it over with, right?
Just get it over with, but do it in a positive way. Like, I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of it.
Right.
I want to admit that I have, when people say, well, what are my biggest weaknesses and my biggest strengths? But my biggest weakness is my biggest strength. Like, that's the worst thing ever. I hate that fucking answer, right? I suck at this. I'm working on it, but I still suck at it, right?
Yeah.
Like, just own it.
Yeah.
But then I would turn around and ask, this is the other tip that I would do. If someone ever asked me one of those, I call them the stupid questions in an interview, I just turn around, answer it honestly, and then go, what about you? What's your biggest weakness and strength? Right? Why should I come work for you if that's your weakness? Right?
Yeah.
If you're telling me you don't have enough time to spend time on the floor, why should I come work with you?
Yeah.
Now it's on them. This is because those are the answers we want to know. Those are the answers I want to know as a potential rep or manager, VP.
And as somebody in a hiring position, like, I respect those kind of questions.
Yes.
I pay a lot of attention to the questions somebody asks me
Mm-hmm.
during the interview process.
Yep.
How powerful they are, how intelligent they are. Oftentimes.
Why does that matter to you? When you say I pay attention to the kinds of questions they ask me, why do you like it when someone challenges you a little bit?
Well, they have confidence, number one, I feel like, right? And I feel like
How does that confidence translate to a sales skill, though?
Well, come on. I mean, if you have confidence in the interview process, you have confidence in your ability to sell. You have confidence to ask me in an interview process difficult questions. You have confidence to ask a prospect difficult questions as well.
I just wanted you to say it out loud. I know.
Okay. I make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Scott, after 10 years, I really got to make sure you know what you're doing, bud. I don't want you to make more mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
By the way, I heard about what you said about me on the Barrows podcast, just so you know. So I see you.
Well, yeah, it's probably well deserved.
All right. Yes.
I want people who are listening to really think about this, like, kind of flipping the script to changing the mindset here during the interview process. Like, you have a lot more control here than you might think that you do, and a lot more power, right? Yeah, you're in that room because you need a job, but guess what? They need to fill a seat. You know what I mean? Whether it's a VP role or an entry-level sales or whatever role, like, they're under the gun as well. If I don't fill enough seats, like, I'll lose my job, right? So we're interviewing each other here. And, I really think one of the mistakes that people make is just only talking to one or two companies. The last time that I was, like, seriously looking for a job, I was more or less collecting offers is how I looked at it. I had like a dozen different companies in play, and they were scattered not even just across the US, they were scattered across the globe, to be honest with you. I had one really good opportunity in Europe, and I almost took it,
I remember.
So, and that makes the process to me so much more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, I could do this, I could do that. This product is interesting. That product's interesting. This CEO is really cool. That team was cool. The culture, this city was cool. Right? And it just, like, it frees me up, I think, to not be held hostage to a particular opportunity.
Yep.
Right? And that empowers me to ask questions that I might be otherwise too scared to ask.
Totally.
Right?
So I want to come back, and then I want to move on to sort of the interview process. But LinkedIn and resume, what you agree or disagree with? Are they the same thing, different?
Oh, to me, it's the same thing at this point in time. When people ask me for my resume, I say, yeah, look at my LinkedIn profile. And I need a copy. And I say, okay, then download the PDF.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't even have one saved on my.
Yeah.
I literally don't have one at this point in time.
Yep.
So, I just think that you're forcing people to jump through hoops for no particular reason. If you're a hiring manager, to create a resume and forward it over, no, just send me the link to your LinkedIn profile. And people who are looking for gigs, like, all the more reason that your LinkedIn profile better be up to date and better be robust, right?
So what about this? So let's say I got a job, I got a good job, right? And I'm like, God, man, I haven't really updated my LinkedIn profile. And, since I got here a year ago, 18 months, I think I should go update it. But I'm concerned that, if my boss sees it, he's going to think I'm looking, or she's going to think I'm looking. What do I do? Like, should I still update it? Like, how do I avoid that pitfall that exists? I have an answer to this, but what's your advice to people on that one?
Number one, I am not trolling and scanning LinkedIn
As a boss, you as
a boss to
right.
see which people of mine are like, making changes every day or on the regular to their LinkedIn. I don't have time for that shit.
And if they are, what's your opinion of that boss?
If they're not a very good boss, what are they doing with their time if they're doing that? Right?
Yeah.
They're not focused on anything that's driving the business forward. They're overly paranoid. Like I'm not doing that. Look, and if you have an issue with my organization and you're looking around or thinking about looking around, like, all right, go ahead. I'm maybe we're not doing something right, or maybe you're not doing something right, and maybe I'm okay with you leaving.
Yep.
Go ahead. I got no problem. I'm so open about all this stuff that I have employees who come up to me and say, "Hey, Richard, hey, Scott, I got approached by such and such company. They're asking about this, that, and the other." And I'm like, why don't you talk to them? If they make you an offer that I can't beat, more power to you. Go take it. I've done my job. I've helped you get where you're trying to go. If you don't like what they have to say, then come on back. The grass is not always greener on the other side, right? Interview them. See how much that you hear that you don't like, that kind of thing. So
see what you're worth, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point, right? Like that is the whole point. And I think if you don't know this, for those who don't know, you can turn off notifications in your LinkedIn profile. I would at least encourage that. You don't necessarily need to make it easy for your boss to get that notification. Oh, so and so updated their profile.
Yeah.
At least be smart about it. You're not being sneaky. You're being professionally discreet so that you don't distract your boss, so you don't distract other people on your team, because it's going to notify every fucking body, and you don't distract yourself to do what you need to do. Look, nobody's going to take care of you more than you, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And companies will try to take care of you, and they will claim to, and they will. It is their job to build that culture. But ultimately, you as a human being, you got to look out for yourself a little bit, because when it hits the fan, the company's going to make the decisions they need to make.
That's right. And they don't own your LinkedIn profile
at all. Period. That's a whole other topic. We're going to go into that.
This is my real estate. Okay.
Yep.
I don't have to put your company picture as my background. Sorry.
Never.
Unless I want to. And I certainly.
Well, they pay you. Hey, if you're going to use my real estate on the corner of First and Main Street, and you want me to be a guy out there spinning a sign about houses, then pay me. Even that guy gets paid to spin that little placard and flip it around. Like, freaking pay me.
Yeah.
Right? And no, that doesn't mean my base salary or commissions.
Right.
That's not my job. So.
You're going to get, you're going to get upset because somebody in the organization gave me a recommendation. And so because I got a recommendation, it makes you paranoid to think that I'm going to leave. Come on, man.
All right. So, and if you're working in a world like that, then that should tell you what your culture is, and you should be looking to leave. Right. And if you're a boss who's built that culture, well,
stop.
Good luck to you. See ya.
Stop.
Scott, this is where we plug ourselves for consulting services. I'll even give you the first 30 minutes free. So, but sort of moving on. So let's get into the interview, right? Like, so we've set up LinkedIn. We've talked about those things, what to look for in your job. Let's talk about that interview. Let's talk about that first interview. And you tend to hire a lot at the early stage sales rep career, right? Like that's for most of what you've done. I want to talk about them in two different ways. This person who's first or second sales job, first job out of college, what are the things you would give? What advice would you give those people? It's like, what do you mean going and interview them? I don't even have a job. How should I interview Scott Leese? How can I think I'm interviewing him? I don't have anything yet. What's your advice to that person?
Well, I think one of the best things you could do is know what you want out of your next role and on some level your career. One of the worst things that I can hear from somebody is, well, I'm still kind of trying to figure it out. Right? I might want to do this. I might want to do that. Man, my job is not to help you figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. My job is to help the people who know what they want to do right now get to where they want to go next.
Yeah, but what happens if I'm, look, I'm 24, 25 years old. I think I might like sales. I don't know. Like, are you
Yeah,
sort of
well,
like,
you're an idiot if you come interview for a sales job and you say, well, I might like sales. I don't really know. Fucking lie to me. I'd rather you lie to me. You can still have that thought in the back of your head, but don't come into a sales interview and tell me, well, I might like sales, I might like marketing, I might like CS. I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I ain't hiring that person.
right?
Period. I am period, because you don't even have the smarts to fake it. You don't have the smarts to lie to me and be like, yeah, I want to do sales.
Right.
No, but if you're keeping it really honest, like the people that I want in that early stage are the people who are like, yeah, I haven't done a lot of sales, but that's what I want to do. I want to get in early. I want to learn. I like the financial opportunity. I like talking to people. I like building value, all this kind of stuff. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear about somebody who's wishy-washy and trying to figure it out.
Right. What if I come in and I said, Scott, look, man, I love changing people's minds. I want to convince them to change the way they're doing things. Is that better than coming in and saying, well, I like talking to people and helping them solve their problems? Like, do you really want to hear people say, oh, I like solving problems,
There's pieces of both those comments that I like and don't like.
What are the pieces you don't like? Let's start there.
Well, I don't tend to, when somebody says I like talking to people, that makes me think of like a Nordstrom's, worker who's just like servicey and friendly and just trying to
all inbound,
totally helpful. Like that doesn't strike me as a hunter or a closer. So I don't love that particular piece.
So if someone comes in and says that, and they say, so now let's flip it. Let's give some managers some advice, right? Let's say some rep comes in and says, well, you look at the things, you're like, this person looks interesting, it's worthy of a shot, and they're still early in their career. They don't know how to interview. So how do you help bring it out of them in that interview? If I come in and I say, hey, Scott, I really like working with people and helping people solve their problems. I see all the stuff you do on LinkedIn and how smart you are, and you look like the kind of person I want to work for. But, what would you then say to me to try and pull out more?
Well, I would probably say that you sound like a customer service person to me. You like helping people with their problems. You like talking to people, helping them out. How come you haven't looked at customer success, customer service?
Okay.
And that direct kind of question helps me get to the answer that I'm looking for one way or the other. If somebody responds to that and is like, well, hold on a second, and has a good answer as to why they don't want to do that, I like that. That tells me that they're self-aware and they know who they are. If they're like, well, I've thought about that and I've applied to some of those jobs, then I'm like, oh, red flags going off. Like they don't know what they want to do.
This is another tip for the managers out there, and even for the reps who are listening. I remember you used to do this a long time ago, which was we would interview people when we worked together, and your favorite tactic, which I loved and picked up from you, was, or a tactic that I've ended up loving, was, you know what, Scott? I don't know, man. I mean, the interview could go great. Let's sort of prep. The interview goes great. You really like it. And you're like, Scott, I don't know, man. I'm just not convinced. I don't know. Why don't we do this, Scott? Why don't you go home and sleep on it tonight? And if you're still interested, call me back tomorrow. Right? Like you would say this to reps. You taught me to say this to reps or candidates.
I still do variations of that kind of thing. I still would kind of say, look, sounds like you got a few things going on. You got a bunch of irons in the fire. Why don't you go home and sleep on it? Think about our company. Think about what we do, where we're headed. Think about working for me. Think about working for Richard and these other people. Think about our culture, and get back to me tomorrow if it still feels like something that you want to do. If not, good luck with some of these other opportunities. And sometimes that pushes people away, and I'm okay with that. And sometimes what happens is it makes those people really want to fight for the role and get back in.
Right.
And either of those are good outcomes for me in my world, in the hiring manager seat in that moment.
Where do you in this stage of the game, sort of going back, and again, we're sort of folks shifting a little bit more in management. For the, is that something you do after the first interview, after the second interview? When would you try that strategy these days?
I do, right. First, I this is like a pet peeve of mine. I cannot stand a like 12-step interview process. How fucking long does it take for somebody to make a decision? Okay.
Right.
Especially salespeople who are results driven and like instant gratification. You know what I mean? You talk to certain founders and, you know, they're like engineers or they're, you know, private equity, finance kind of people. It's like they do this very regimented, like little by little, week or two goes by. It's like, dude, I have way moved on by you after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know? So I move quick, man. You know, in the early stages, like I'll have a phone call with you and, you know, if it makes sense, we'll bring you on in. When you come in, I will have you meet with as many people as I can right there in that moment, because I don't want to have to bring you in again and go through all of this stuff all over again. And it's unfair to the candidate. How many times do you have to leave work in the middle of the day, right? Or leave on your lunch break and like dart back and forth? Dude, that's screwed up, man. You know, I'm not into that. So I'd move quickly.
How do you feel about just
As a candidate, that's like a massive red flag to me. I'm thinking to myself, man, I have interviewed with you 3 or 4 times and like, you don't know if I'm a good hire or not. That tells me you're going to make every other decision this particular way. It's going to take ages for you to decide to, you know, invest in this piece of training or technology. It's going to take ages for you to decide to give me a raise. I don't want to deal with that.
Yep. What
that's something for people to look out for, in my opinion.
What's your theory? And I've only participated on. I've never organized one, so my knowledge is limited. What's your theory on the 2 or 3 hour interview where they run you through the grinder, right? Like there is value to like, hey, coming in and spending an hour, maybe an hour and a half to meet with Scott, 30 minutes with Scott, 30 minutes with a rep, 30 minutes with your potential manager. Like I get that, but like, where is that too much? Do you think that's a smarter way these days? Like, what's your thought?
I personally don't think it's too much. I would rather talk to everybody that I might need to talk to the first time I come in and have to keep going back and talk to somebody new every single time. That does not feel like an efficient use of my time,
Right.
or an efficient use of the company's resources.
Yep.
So I'd have no problem going in and spending 30 minutes talking to 6 or 7 different people, and getting it over with, getting to a yes or a no faster. Isn't that what we try to do in sales?
Yeah.
You're trying to get to a yes or a no faster.
Yeah.
Right.
How many, just out of curiosity, if you're running a sales team, when you ran sales teams, how many, not the number of times they came in, but let's say they came in, they would meet with you. Who else would they meet with? Like, what was your, just as an example?
Usually like 3 or 4 other people.
Okay.
You know, and I tried personally to, you know, spend a chunk of time, and then everybody else is the same kind of, I really truly don't think anybody needs more than like 30 minutes hiring.
And when you do that, yeah, and I'm just trying to help people who are thinking about a process. When you do that, is it, hey, Scott's going to cover this, you know?
We sort of delegate responsibilities a little bit. You know, I might have one person really focus on like pipeline building. I might have somebody else focus on closing. I might focus on, you know, culture and mindset and that kind of thing. So that way we all know kind of our role and what we're looking for, right? And then we share, you know, feedback and notes. And by the end of the interview process, I go talk to a few of my people, and it's like, okay, 5 of us talk to this person, you know, rate them on this particular thing. Are we a yes? Are we a no? Are we a maybe? If we're a maybe, how do we get off the maybe seat and get to a yes or a no, right? You know, I try to move very fast.
Do you have like a rubric that you used, or you that?
No. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I just didn't.
That's why I'm asking, because I know you. Scott's like, don't give me one more fucking spreadsheet to manage.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of like making more work for myself,
right,
or anybody else, as you know. Yeah.
So,
sales is like it's the hardest thing, in my opinion, the hardest role to fill and get right. You know, but you could put people through every personality test there is, every spreadsheet rubric that there is. I'm telling you, you're not going to get that much closer, if at all, to hiring the right candidates every single time. If somebody had figured that out, that playbook would be out there already.
Yeah.
It would be out there already, and those people would be very, 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 very rich.
Yeah, I hear you.
Doesn't exist yet.
Yep. So next question for you. Well, actually not question, but I want to move this forward. Let's go back to the interview, right? So I'm a rep. I'm coming in to interview. What questions as a rep should I be asking my potential boss as a sales rep, right? What kind of questions should I be asking? I've got a couple of them, but that sort of put us in that different mindset we've been talking about, where like it's a level playing field, where I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me.
I want to hear from you first this time, because you've been out of the game on some level for a little while, right? Yeah. So I'm curious if from your vantage point, your questions are the same as mine, having been in the thick of this for so long.
Yeah.
So you go first.
So obviously the first thing I look at is the resume and putting the numbers first. The standard interview process, and you tell me.
But you're a rep interviewing them. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a rep. I want to come work for Scott. What kind of questions should I ask Scott?
Yeah.
This is my single go-to question that I tell people to ask, and it works wonderfully. And I think it'll be fairly obvious. But if you're interviewing me, I'll be like, hey, Scott, if you could snap your fingers right now and change 3 things at your company, what would they be? Just so I understand what it's like here.
And what answers are you?
Doesn't matter.
You're looking for? It doesn't matter.
Nope.
It doesn't
matter. The answer.
Oh, are you trying to role play with me right now?
Yeah, I'm role playing. Come on,
man. We have larger pipeline,
mm-hmm.
right? I would have all of the bugs and glitches and features that are everything in the product working smoothly, and new stuff coming out faster,
mm-hmm.
right? And I would have everybody onboarded and successfully implementing product inside 30 days.
Sounds good. So what's preventing all that from even happening now, Scott? If those are the 3 most important things, why is it taking so long?
Well, now you have me pinned. And explain why you're doing this.
Because I want to know what the culture of the company's like inside. I want to understand how decisions are made. I want to understand how good is my boss, right? How good are they at handling objections, right? For me, it's also a culture thing, right? It tells me, if Scott goes off on this, it's not my department and I can't control it. I'll be like, yeah, but Scott, then why would I need to come now? Well, if you can't control it and it's a frustration, it's only going to be worse for me because I'm the end user. I'm the guy who's got to sell it.
Yeah, I agree.
Do that.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Now Scott's got to sell me on why I need to come back to this company. Right. That's my What was your interpretation when you heard me pin you that way?
Well, no, I knew what you were trying to do, and now I have 1 of 2 choices. I have to backtrack, or I have to spill the beans on some stuff that is, not necessarily amazing about my company or my sales process.
Yep.
So if I was going down that rabbit hole and got pinned like that, I would very much lean towards total transparency. And I would be like, yeah, we have shit that is fucked up, man. This stuff is hard. And the difference between me and the other orgs that you're talking to is you're probably not going to have another VP tell you the truth the way I'm telling you. And that my only way out is, in my opinion, is total transparency.
Yeah.
Right. The difference is you're going to be able to trust me.
Right.
I'm trying to get all this stuff done and fixed, and we're working on all this stuff. And I'm not trying to hustle you the way some of the other people are.
Yep.
Right. And if that works, great. And if it doesn't, so be it. Right.
So that's my one go-to question that I coach people on.
That's a really good one for people too.
Because it kind of blows the mind of the person who they're interviewing, and it makes you stand out in a very positive way. It also shows, psychologically, what it's doing to the subconscious is that it's showing this potential boss that you're unafraid to ask tough questions.
Yeah.
That you're willing to engage in a dialogue when it's not going right. Because the reverse of it is that, hey, what happens when your prospect says to you, you know, Mr. Rep or Mrs. Rep, you know, can your product or service do this? Do you know how to handle that as an answer as opposed to asking it as a question, right?
I hope people are paying attention to asking that question, because the types of questions that hiring managers get asked instead is like, why do you like working here? You know,
Yeah.
or how many of your reps hit quota yesterday,
yeah.
right? Like, what is that really telling you? You
right.
know, what is that telling you? You know, if I'm going in hiring, I like to ask people, are you okay with me having conversations with a bunch of people on the team? This is one thing for the founders or the VP or, you know, who might be my direct boss to tell me how things are. But I want to have conversations with people who are, you know, boots on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And so I like to ask people, are you okay with me having conversations with folks in some of these different roles or different departments and things like that? I feel like that helps give me a good 360-degree view of the organization. And if somebody told me no, that would be a red flag to me that there's a problem. Why don't they want me to talk to somebody who is in CS? Why don't they want me to talk to somebody who's a rep right now? That's weird.
So did I pass your test even though I've been out of the game? Was my question good?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hope people listening take it away and use that.
What's the question or two you encourage reps to ask of their potential boss?
Well, I just said one. I think people should ask if they can have conversations with other people, you know, on the team that are outside of the interview process, right? I think people should ask sort of, what is your goal and what are we trying to do here? I think it's ridiculous how taboo it is to talk about the end game. I've never understood that. You know, I don't know if people are just superstitious, like don't talk about it while it's in progress or something like that. But I want to know, like,
Talk about what in progress? You broke up there. Don't talk about what?
Like, there's a superstition in sports, like don't talk about a no-hitter while it's in progress.
Right.
I feel so many times like managers and founders and what, like nobody wants to talk about what the end game is. Everybody's like, oh, you know, we're not going to talk about IPO. We're not going to talk about acquisition. It's like, well, I want to know. I want to know, like, what is the plan here? You know, are you signed up for like a 10 to 15 year run to try to IPO and be a multi-billion-dollar company, or are you trying to, you know, get to like 10 million ARR and then flip the company for 50, 60 million? Like, what am I signing up for?
Yeah, so nobody ever does that, which I find
what's that?
Nobody ever does that. They never get it to 10 and flip it for 60. Once they hit 10, they think about 100.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother era of a whole nother bit of stupidity in my mind where greed takes over, right? But at any rate, like, I think people should ask those kind of questions. Like, why are you here still? You know, what is the opportunity in front of you? What is the goal?
Yep.
What are you trying to get to and why?
Yep.
And why?
Yep.
Right? And what are the opportunities that you see, you know, bubbling up in the future? What are the things that you look for? What are the commonalities in the things that you've seen of people who have started at the bottom and have ended up being able to move up in your organization?
So I have a question for you that I think this is a question reps should ask, and I think then maybe we'll wrap it up. But, you know, and I know part of your answer, but I don't know all of it. But if I'm a rep and I go in and I say, hey, Scott, just out of curiosity, how many people on the team? You got a 10 of 10, a team of 10. Let's just make it easy, right? You got a team of 10. How many people are hitting goal right now? Like, that's a standard question people are supposed to ask, right? Or if you're not, you should. What should I be listening for from the manager back? Like, if Scott comes back and says, oh, that's a great question, Richard. You know what? We got 6 out of 10 people hitting, or we've got 9 out of 10 people hitting. What does that really tell the rep when they hear those numbers? Because I think sometimes they just think they should ask the question because they need to ask the question. It's a good question. But what should they really be listening for?
And this is a really tricky one, you know. I think most reps are hoping to hear that 10 out of 10 people are hitting quota. That is a huge red flag to me. I can't fathom. I don't know any organization where 10 out of 10 people are hitting quota. If they are all hitting quota, I would think that the quota is going to get raised like 5 minutes ago. So that doesn't make any sense. If somebody says nobody's hitting quota, that's going to be equally concerning. Like, why is that? Is the quota must be way too high, or this particular product is just not even sellable? You know, the sweet spot and the right answer is like 70 to 75% of people, should be at quota. That's the right kind of number.
Right.
You know, I think people should be listening for honesty and transparency and a good explanation, not just the number. Well, last month we had 6 out of 10 people hit quota. The average percent to goal, or percent attainment was this. The average income and commissions from those people was this, right? And those are important. There's much more important numbers, I think, than what percent of people hit goal.
If you were a boss, right? Like, I want you to be the bad boss for a minute, and I asked you this question. What's a bullshit answer that a rep should be like, this guy's, I don't want to work for a guy. So if I say, Scott, how many people out of the month or the quarter are hitting goal? And even if you say 7 to 10, but how is the leader going to bullshit that answer anyway, so that the rep can start to think about, wait a minute, is this person even telling me the truth, even though that's a reasonable number?
Well, I think if they just say, like 80, 90% of people hit quota basically every single month, and then stop. It's the stopping that is the concerning part to me.
What about that stop concerns you?
There's no detail, there's no data, there's no explanation. Like, what if 100% of people hit quota, right? The commission payout is like $1. What difference does it make? If 50% of people hit quota, but the average rep on the floor made $10,000 in commissions, is that bad? I want to know. I need to know more. What does it all mean? Mm-hmm. Right? So the not giving any detail or explanation of the answer really would concern me. And that's the shitty boss to me is,
yep.
80% hit quota.
Yep.
And then like nothing else, no other detail.
Yep. Cool. Any other last minute tips or advice on interviewing for folks? I think we've gone wild.
Just to like summarize for me, it's like, your LinkedIn profile basically is your resume to me. So you should treat it with care. You should not get stuck on one opportunity. You should be treating it like a pipeline. And in any kind of pipeline, you want to have like 5, 10x the number of deals that you expect to close. So you should be kind of having 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 job opportunities floating around, and change the power dynamic. Make sure you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
No, I think that's great, man. Thank you.
Give the audience your 3 takeaways?
My 3 takeaways are: 1, own your LinkedIn profile. We didn't discuss it, but I'll tell it. When you apply to a job, go apply to the job. Go connect with who you think your line manager is on LinkedIn, saying, hey, I just applied to this job, but I wanted to just sort of make a connection in case it's you. I would go connect with who I think is in HR and do the exact same thing. Hey, I just applied to this job. Not sure if it's going to fall under you or someone else at the org, but just want to let you know I'm super interested. I would then pick up the phone and I would call this potential hiring manager. I would pick up the phone and call that potential HR person. That's 5 things. That's your cadence. That's your sequence of prospecting your job searches. And you do that and you will get more interviews. And if you get more interviews, you get to do these things that Scott and I are talking about. So there you go. I didn't get it out there as fast as when I wanted, but that's it. So that, owning your LinkedIn profile, going after it in a very meticulous prospecting way, flipping the script, right? Ask those tough questions. Don't put your potential boss on the spot in a rude way, but it's okay to push a little bit and see how they respond, because you need to see how they respond in those moments. And then I think the last thing is ask those questions. Ask that question of, hey, What are the 3 things that you wish you could change at the snap of a finger? Great. What's preventing it? Asking more about the compensation around those things that Scott was talking about. So those are more than 3, but those are good takeaways and a good summary. So
Good stuff. Good
all
stuff.
right.
Till
Cool.
next time.
I'll catch you at the next one.
All right.
See you,
Later.
brother. Love you.